This is the first episode of Pixels to Pictures, a new series for my channel, and the first movie we're going to be looking at is Mortal Kombat. Alright everyone, hope you are doing well. Thank you for pressing play once again. I'm the man they call Pixel Paul, and this is Pixels to Pictures, and this is the first episode in what I hope is going to be a series of videos where I look at video game movie adaptations, so games that are made into films basically, and there's a lot of them. There's been a lot of them made over the years. I've got quite a few in my collection and I've been wanting to use them on these videos in some sort of way for quite a while now, so this is the first one, and what better place to start? We're going all the way back to 1995 to take a look at Mortal Kombat. Released in 1995, Mortal Kombat brought the legendary fighting game to the big screen with high energy and martial arts and unforgettable one-liners. Directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, the film stars Robin Shou as Liu Kang, Christopher Lambert as Raiden, and Linden Ashby as Johnny Cage. Despite a modest budget, it became a box office hit and credited as helping shape the future of video game movies. So we all know about Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat came out around, what was it, 92, 93, something like that in the arcades. And we got the home console versions as well. Caused a lot of controversy back in the day because of how violent it was in a way for a video game. I mean, we look back on it now and it's pretty tame and in many respects, but back then it caused a lot of controversy. So when it was announced that it was going to be made into a movie, I think that raised a few eyebrows as well. So Mortal Kombat was going to be the fourth ever video game movie to be made. So we'd had Super Mario Brothers, we'd had Double Dragon, we'd had Street Fighter, and chances are we'll probably touch on those three films at some point in this series. But I think it's fair to say that they did not perform as well as the studios hoped, certainly in terms of box office. But yeah, we'll go into those in a little bit more detail in other videos in this series. So Mortal Kombat was the fourth one. Interesting choice in many ways. I guess there was a lot riding on this as well for game companies anyway. You know, the move into movies hadn't been easy. It hadn't really been done particularly well. So Mortal Kombat was the next one to try and crack the market in a way. Now, it didn't get off to a great start. It was given a relatively small budget compared to those other three films, maybe not Double Dragon, but certainly Street Fighter and Mario Brothers had a significant higher budget compared to Mortal Kombat's $20 million, which it had to make the film. So yeah, not the greatest start for it in many ways, but what it did get was a decent up-and-coming, I think, at the time, director in Paul W.S. Anderson. And probably the fact that they had the writers, so Tobias and Boone, who, were involved with the making of Mortal Kombat, they were on board as writers as well. And, to be fair, it really does show, because compared to, say, those other three movies, you can actually see the fact that the director had really sort of bought into Mortal Kombat. He knew the characters, the writers knew the characters, they knew the lore, they knew what the game was about. And other than some of the sort of constraints that I guess were put on them by the movie studios, they were able to sort of create something that even now I would say is one of the most almost sort of game accurate movies or video game movies that has been made. So in the movie itself, you've got all of the main characters that were in the game. So you've got the 7 main characters. You've got Liu Kang, Johnny Cage, Sonya Blade, Raiden. You've got Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Kano. You've got the 2 bosses. You've got Goro. You've got Shang Tsung. You've also got the hidden boss in there as well, or hidden character. Reptile is in the film too. And obviously we're at 1995 at this point, so I think we're just on the verge of having Mortal Kombat 3 if it wasn't out already. So there are a few sort of cameo appearances from other Mortal Kombat characters, especially from Kombat 2. You had a sort of smallish cameo from Jax, a very brief cameo from Shao Kahn, and a sort of extended character in there as well of Kitana, who plays a sort of bigger part than those other two characters. So all of those characters are in there, and they were cast really, really well. you could not complain really about any of the castings or looks of those characters. Whenever we see like a video game adaptation these days, the first thing that you look at is who's been cast in what character, and it's the one thing that probably turns people away from things. So I'm thinking of like the Last of Us series. As soon as Ellie was cast, people turned off. There's other examples as well. Uncharted, when they cast Nathan Drake, it just didn't work, did it? So with Mortal Kombat, they absolutely nailed the cast. The quality of the acting, again, we'll touch on that maybe later. But in terms of look, you could not beat it. It was absolutely spot on, really. And the guys that they brought in as the cast, they kind of embraced the film a little bit as well. I'm thinking of the bigger name actors as well here. So I mean, it's not an A-list cast list by any stretch. But Christopher Lambert, who was a pretty reasonably well-known actor at the time, playing Raiden, and I think Raiden probably is one of the characters that maybe people could have slight complaint about in some ways, because his character look isn't necessarily the same as what it is in the games, and he does take a very much kind of storytelling sage Obi-Wan Kenobi type role in this film, in that he's just there almost to drive the plot along really and explain plot points. He doesn't get involved in any fights or anything like that. But yeah, Christopher Lambert, he gives what he can to this film. He looks like he's actually having quite a bit of fun with it as well. He has quite a sort of dry sense of humour in the film as well, so that kind of helps with it. You've also got the likes of Talisa Soto as Princess Kitana. She's a princess in this. She's in there as well. She was a relatively well-known actress at the time too. Off the back of License to Kill, when she was a Bond girl in that. And you also had, and I'm going to try and pronounce this right, Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa, who plays Shang Tsung. He's a great actor, I think. Again, he was in License to Kill with Talisa Soto as well. So they were probably the three biggest names that you would sort of recognise on the cast. And, they do what they can with the characters and with the dialogue, which we'll touch on as well in a little bit. So, yeah, the actual film itself then. So, story-wise, I don't want to say it's flimsy or anything like that, but if you've seen Enter the Dragon, then you will pretty much know what you're going to get with Mortal Kombat, the movie, because it's very, very similar to Enter the Dragon. And it's weird to think that, we're talking about Mortal Kombat now, and that was released 1995, so it's 30 years old. And Enter the Dragon was roughly about 30 years prior to Mortal Kombat being released. So there's it's quite a big difference between where we are now, when that came out, and when Enter the Dragon came out. But yeah, there's a huge influence on this film from Enter the Dragon. It's very similar. The only difference really is the fact that there's the kind of supernatural edge to it, if you like. So yeah, it's all based around the fact that there is a tournament, like in the game, a tournament where fighters from different realms or Earth realm put up against fighters from the Outworld realm, which is ruled by Shao Kahn. So this tournament is done every millennia, and this is all explained by Christopher Lambert as Raiden. It's carried out every millennia, and this one is the important one because they have to prevent the Outworld realm from winning 10 tournaments in a row, otherwise they'll be able to invade Earth. Why? We don't really know. It's never really explained why they have to win 10. Why not just one and then do it? But yeah, they have to win 10 in a row. And it's up to the main three characters that we've got here, Liu Kang, Sonya Blade and Johnny Cage, who Raiden has seen into their souls and seen that one of them will defeat Shang Tsung. How does he know? Well, I don't know. How does he not know which one of them it's going to be? Who knows? Who cares, really? What really confuses me with this is that, Raiden's obviously backing the three sort of Earth fighters, but it seems to be Shang Tsung that brings them to the tournament. I've never quite understood that. Maybe it's explained in there, and I've missed it, but it's always a bit of a, not necessarily a plot hole, but it doesn't seem to quite tie up for me. But anyway, they all enter into the tournament. They're all sort of brought there by a look for revenge, an ego trip, and looking for Kano. So Sonya Blade is trying to hunt down Kano. So they're all brought to the tournament, and the rest of the film is very much sort of the fight scene after fight scene, as you would expect from a martial arts film, really. And when you watch a martial arts film, you are kind of just waiting for the next fight scene. And that's kind of the same with this Mortal Kombat movie. The in-between bits are just plot points pushing the film along to get to that next fight scene. How the actual tournament itself is set up is a little bit random, a little bit weird. It just feels like people kind of march to one area of this island that they're on, and they're told, right, you're going to fight now. And that just seems to be the way it's done all the way through to the end of the film. So the actual sort of tournament side of it, don't know. It's a bit random. But yeah, that's pretty much it plot-wise. There is not a huge amount to it. And it's Mortal Kombat. It's a very straightforward sort of game. Do you want much more sort of plot with it? I'm not sure. They've obviously tried it with the later Mortal Kombat films, or these newer ones, the reboots, if you like. But for this, I think it's just enough. There's just enough plot in there to keep you interested and to keep you wanting to watch, to see the next fight and the next fight and then the next fight and see where it ends. So I guess in many ways, there are a lot of things that maybe you could say about this movie and sort of pull apart and, you know, almost sort of make it very dismissive of the movie. And yeah, there are things like that, but there are also some really good points to it as well, I think. And I've sort of touched on it before, the fact that it's so close to the game, the characters are so close to the game, and the look and feel of the film is very much like a Mortal Kombat. It feels like a Mortal Kombat film. Whether that's because of how many times I've watched it personally, I don't know, but it just feels like a Mortal Kombat film should be. So yeah, the characters, the closeness, the sort of director's vision of those characters as well is absolutely spot on. There's a lot of attention to detail in there, and the characters get a decent part of the film as well. All the characters are given a decent amount of time on screen as well, I think. With the exception of maybe sort of like Reptile, who sort of flits into the film now and then and has one sort of major fight. I don't think any character maybe necessarily feels left out. And that's hard to do when you've got so many characters to throw into a film. It is kind of hard to balance the screen time. Obviously, the three main characters get the most amount of airtime in the film. I think of those three characters, probably it's Sonya Blade, who feels a little bit, if she wasn't there, you wouldn't necessarily miss her particularly. She's very much there to kind of, well, you know, add a female character into the film. She's there pretty much to just sort of grimace at Johnny Cage's one-liners. And she has one half decent fight with Kano through the film. It's probably the worst fight of the movie, actually, in many ways. You can tell that both characters or both actors in that fight scene are not fully sort of martial arts trained compared to the other guys that are in the movie. But that being said, yeah, Sonya Blade's character is probably the most forgettable of the main sort of three in a way. She spends the last maybe sort of 20 minutes of the movie in the weirdest outfit, and you don't really know why particularly. I think even Johnny Cage queries it at one point. So yeah, she's sort of the most sort of forgettable character in the movie, which is a shame in a way, because in the game she is the sort of sole female character in there, and she's a bit of a badass, but in the film a bit forgettable, which is a shame, really. But yeah, speaking of sort of the fight scenes are what we're there for, basically. It's a martial arts movie, and we all look forward to those sort of individual one-on-one battles. And in the whole, in the main, all the fights are actually pretty well done. They're pretty well choreographed. Like I say, probably the only one that isn't maybe is the Sonya Blade Kano one. That's the one that probably lets the film down a little bit. But in the main, yeah, the rest of the fight scenes are actually pretty good, pretty well choreographed. We're not talking Bruce Lee, Jet Li, Jackie Chan, whoever, levels of sort of choreography, but we're certainly not sort of talking Power Rangers level here. It's a lot better than that kind of thing. So yeah, the one that sort of always stands out for me, the Liu Kang versus Reptile. Once it gets going, that's a decent fight. You've also got a good one between Liu Kang and Sub-Zero, which is good, just a little bit maybe too brief. I think the standout one for me is probably the Scorpion versus Johnny Cage fight, which starts off in like almost like a bamboo forest, and then they are transported via Scorpion's teleportation move into a really dodgy looking cheap set. It's very hard to explain. It's a lot of scaffolding, a lot of skulls and bones. I may have heard this wrong, but I thought I'd heard that the second part of that fight was added in at a later date because they felt like some of the fight scenes weren't quite long enough. I might be wrong there, but I'm sure I'd heard that that one was added in later, after sort of the movie sort of tied up, or it's just something that was added in after test screenings or something like that. I could be wrong with that, but I'm glad they did, because that sort of second part of that fight is really well done, really well lit, even if the actual set that they're fighting in is a little bit odd. So yeah, the fight scenes themselves, are very enjoyable. It's probably only the very last fight, which is a bit of a letdown, really. It's a bit of an anticlimax, and obviously it's a fight between one of the three characters, and I won't say who, and Shang Tsung, and it does kind of finish not abruptly, but I don't know. You kind of are hoping for more. You're expecting a little bit more, and you don't quite get that with the last fight scene. But it ties the film up quite nicely. It sets up a second film as well. Again, we'll touch on that second film at some point in the series, I would imagine. But yeah, just that one last fight scene is a little bit of an anticlimax. So we'll move on to sort of the bad points of the film, and there are some very big, glaring bad points with it. It's 1995. CGI is not quite where we are now, obviously. So some of the CGI, some of the special effects in this movie are quite cheap looking. I'm thinking of Reptile in particular. So Reptile starts off as a reptile done in CGI. He then turns into a more sort of humanoid kind of ninja character. But the actual special effects and CGI for Reptile are a little bit ropey, not great. There are also some other sort of special effects thrown in there which do the job. They're not perfect though. There's a lot of sort of electricity kind of looking special effects from Raiden. Some of them work, some of them don't. They just look a bit odd. And some of the set design is absolutely incredible. The sort of closer set designs are really quite good. When they try to up the scale of those sets, which are done, I don't think they're done with CGI, some of those. I think some of them are done with like the sort of green screens, and some of them are done maybe with matte paintings as well, that kind of thing, with the actors then acting on top of him. Some of those scenes don't quite work and look really, really fake. But other than that, yeah, the only other special effect, if you like, and this is the one that sort of drew a lot of attention, is Goro, or Prince Goro, as he's called in this, Goro, which is done as a complete sort of animatronic suit rather than CGI. And I personally am glad they didn't go down the CGI route with Goro. I'm someone who, I just prefer that look of on-set animatronic creations. And I think Goro, a lot of people smirked at Goro when he was shown in the film originally, but when you look back now, I personally still think he looks relatively impressive. I think it just looks more sort of grounded. It looks more part of the movie. It looks like he's actually interacting with the other characters, and he has a big interaction with Johnny Cage, with one of Johnny Cage's special moves as well, which does bring about one shot which is a little bit weird looking.
Let's dance.
But yeah, having that Goro for me was always a plus point, but for a lot of people just didn't like the animatronic, and I think it's partly animatronic. I think there was still an actor inside the suit as well, and I'm sure I heard some story as well about the actor in the Goro suit nearly having a bit of an accident in there with something like it was obviously all electrical, and it fell into a puddle or something like that, and he nearly was electrocuted. Again, I could be wrong. I might have just heard that from somewhere random. But yeah, Goro, I quite like Goro, but I can see why some people don't like him. So I think even now it doesn't look too bad. I think Goro looks all right in the film. Some of the acting as well. They're obviously working with a budget, and you know there was only a certain sort of level of cast that they could bring in. I think they probably spent a lot of the cast budget probably on bringing Christopher Lambert in, and he does okay. He's never been the world's greatest actor, but he certainly does the job in the films that he's been in. I'm thinking Highlander, he was great in that. But yeah, the rest of the cast and the acting, not necessarily from the main cast, but there is a certain air of and I think people sort of like call it you know, like American sitcom kind of acting, or Days of Our Lives acting, that sort of thing. And there's one or two sort of extras, and I mean there's one character who's not part of the Mortal Kombat games who kind of befriends Johnny Cage. He has a fight with Goro, doesn't end well. You know, he's not the world's greatest actor particularly. He doesn't have too many lines, thankfully. But yeah, there's just one or two moments, one or two bits of dialogue as well, which don't help the cast. Some of the dialogue is very cheesy, very, very cheesy actually. Again, very sort of Days of Our Lives, very, yeah. Just some of it just doesn't work. You almost sort of think you'd have been better off just saying nothing at that point and just letting what is happening on screen unfold, because what you've just said has kind of made me go, but yeah, other than that, dialogue and acting, I think for a $20 million budget film, it is what it is. You are there for the fight scenes at the end of the day. The acting is just part of it, isn't it? I guess. So yeah, I can't go through a review or my thoughts of a Mortal Kombat movie though without mentioning that score. So the score is absolutely amazing. It's one of the things you take away from that film. It's strange in a way because it's obviously a completely sort of, or it's a techno dominated score in a way. We all know the main Mortal Kombat theme, which, you know, it's so far removed from the game score, which was very much kind of done as a, I don't know how you describe it. It's more kind of, I don't quite know how you describe the Mortal Kombat music or what word I would use, but it's not anything like what a techno soundtrack would sound like, really. So you would think it's slightly maybe jarring because it's completely different to the game, maybe completely different to the almost atmosphere of the movie itself, but it just works. It does. It just works. And that Mortal Kombat main theme, the Techno Syndrome, that's the music that you think of now when you hear Mortal Kombat. That is it. That shout of Mortal Kombat, that techno soundtrack kicking in. It's one of the big takeaways of the movie, and it just lifts it a little bit. I think it just gives it a bit more energy as well. I think if they'd used the music from the actual Mortal Kombat game, I think it probably would have been a bit boring in some ways. But the music, that techno soundtrack, whether you like techno or not, in this movie, it does just work. It just lifts the tempo of the movie. It helps push along some of the fight scenes. And it's just a great score. So Mortal Kombat, the movie, I do love it. I do love it. It has its flaws. It is a flawed movie. But when you compare it to the likes of Super Mario Bros., Double Dragon, Street Fighter, and certainly some of the later video game movies that came out as well, it still sort of holds up as being one of the better ones. I mean, it brought in a decent box office as well. I think it was something like $127 million at the box office, which again, compared to its budget, which was $20 million, and compared to the likes of Mario Brothers and Street Fighter, which had a lot bigger budget than 20 million, and they drew, a lot less from the box office as well. So it did all right at the box office, Mortal Kombat, and you can see why they greenlit the sequel, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, very quickly, and I think that came out in 1997 off the back of this one. So you can see why they greenlit it, because it did well at the box office. I think the critics' reviews were very middling. I think they were quite sort of kind to it in a way at the time. It's not an easy film to review because, like I found, because there are so many sort of points to it that you just sort of think, ugh, God, if only that had been a little bit better. And there are some things which probably have or did upset Mortal Kombat fans back in the day as well. Obviously, there's a complete lack of blood and guts and gore, which, you know, the game was sort of not necessarily built around, but, you know, that's what gave it its reputation. There's no fatalities or anything like that. But in general, I just think a lot of people who would love the game back then will have loved the movie. And I think a lot of us still love Mortal Kombat, the original Mortal Kombat film. So I do love it. I think it's great, mostly. I don't think it's the... Do I think it's the greatest video game movie ever? Well, maybe we'll find out over the course of this series whether I think it is or not. But I do like it. I do love it, and I love the soundtrack. And if you've never seen it, you really do need to watch it, just to make your own opinion. So that's it. Those are my thoughts on Mortal Kombat the movie, and that is the first episode in Pixel 2 Pictures, which is going to be, I'm hoping it's going to be, a new series for my channel. I'll let you guys decide whether I should carry on with doing these or not. I can only gauge whether you want this kind of content on my channel by your sort of engagement and reactions from it. So I don't ask often, but if you can like and comment on the video, share it. And if you're not already subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel as well. I don't ask that often, but I thought for this one, I can only gauge reaction from, you know, how many people watch it and how many people like it. So it'd be interesting to see. I would like to do more of these videos, and to be honest, regardless of the reaction, I will probably do a few more at the very least, because I do want to touch on Super Mario Bros., Double Dragon and Street Fighter, certainly, to give my thoughts on those three films. But yeah, for now, that was Mortal Kombat. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know what you thought of Mortal Kombat the movie. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you next time.